our break.
Mm.
Over to you, Gordon and Emmanuel. Yeah. And then Okwe will start in a minute. Bye.
You have the presentation. You haven't received it yet.
Good afternoon, everyone from this side of this world. I welcome us all to the second day of the African Voices for Research. I'm so delighted to chair today's session. My name is Opeyemi Oyewumi Ekundayo. I am a professor of developmental psychology and the director of the Center for Gender and Social Policy Studies at Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. I want to profoundly appreciate the organizers and their sponsors for bringing together this beautiful and impactful conference. I'm sure, Philas, I was here yesterday and I can tell you that it's been impactful, it's been indeed beautiful sessions. We've had conversations around researches people are doing in Africa. And I tell you that the African Voices for Research Conference has two objectives. One is to enrich your knowledge on the how and why of conducting quality research and publishing in Africa, and also to promote transdisciplinary manuscript writing collaboration between members. I encourage us to sit back and look forward to a very beautiful day where our keynote speaker will be, who is Professor Israel Agaku, and we're speaking to us today about on tackling gender sensitivity and research conduct. I encourage all participants to please use your chat box to tell us about your comments. You can react on the chat box, and most importantly, please feel free to ask questions because we are here to learn, to unlearn, and also to relearn. Permit me to quickly introduce to us Professor Israel Agaku by reading a short bio of his. Professor Israel Agaku is a distinguished public health scholar. He's also an epidemiologist at the Harvard University School of Dental Medicine. His academic pursuits spans tobacco control, global health policy, and the intricate relationship between gender and health outcomes. Is widely recognized for his advocacy in championing inclusive methodologies that ensures marginalized voices are adequately represented within scientific inquiries. His work embodies a commitment to reshaping the research landscape so that it becomes more reflective of diverse human experiences and needs. Please join me today in welcoming Professor Israel Agaku for his keynote address. Please ensure to engage on the chat box. Thank you. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Please, can you confirm you can hear me well and see my slides clearly?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much for having me. Today, we'll be talking about how do we tackle gender sensitivity and research conduct. And I'll be tailoring it to the Nigerian lens, but of course, we'll also speak broadly on global issues as well. So it's very helpful to have all of us on the same page in terms of what we mean by gender sensitivity. Because, as you might understand, issues of gender become very triggered topics nowadays. So it's good to be on the same page as to what we're referring to. So in this context, we mean gender sensitivity as the full encompassment of the ability to acknowledge and to make existing gender differences, issues, and inequalities visible. So we can't just shrug things under the rug and say, oh, differences that exist must be natural differences. No, it means that we have the ability to recognize that these differences exist because, as we say, if we can't measure it, we can't act on it. So the ability or the efforts to reduce inequalities, first of all, must start with clear measurement. How do we measure things clearly? And then we can then work on them. So that's the focus of this lecture today. How do we measure differences in outcomes that we care about, and what magnitude of those gaps are attributable to differences in gender, not from a biological perspective, obviously, but from a social construct. So that's what we're going to focus on today. It's also an acknowledgement that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. So creativity and intelligence obviously are not restricted to a gender. However, we recognize that opportunities, who goes from point A to point B, who is taken up the ladder, who is ushered into the room, and others are not, well, that's a function of our connections, it's a function of our gender in some cases. And it's also a function of our gender indirectly because the genders differ by many criteria like risk appetite. Generally, males tend to be more risk-seeking, or females generally tend to be more conservative in terms of their risk appetite. Of course, that translates to differences in how we get rewards. There are also differences in cultural expectations, especially in the African context. A woman is expected to, she may have a career, but she's also expected to come home, cook dinner for the family, and still excel at work. For those who are single, they somehow expect there's a shelf life in terms of marriage, and all of those cultural expectations obviously have a serious impact on how do females then manage or co-manage these cultural expectations versus their own professional aspirations. And then we cannot talk about gender inequalities without talking about power dynamics. So essentially, who has a voice, who has a vote, and who has a veto? Sometimes these key indicators are governed or at least controlled through the lens of gender. And so gender sensitivity means that we can't just pretend that gender has no influence on all of these things. It means that we acknowledge the role that gender plays, and to the extent possible, we try to fix those differences. So we're going to look at it from two perspectives, two sides of a coin, from the perspective of the investigators and participants. Since we're talking about research simply means how do we create knowledge systematically? Well, creating knowledge means there's an investigator who is trying to answer questions. And in most cases, we have participants of whom the question is posed. And that is through that mechanism that would generate new knowledge. So the question then becomes, how do we consider gender sensitivity from the context of both participants whose voice we're trying to capture and inform our research, as well as the investigators who gets to do research, who gets funding to do research, or who is able to publish in top journals, who reaps the benefits of reward of research, right? So our discussion of the role of gender inequalities will not be complete if we do not look at those two perspectives. Because to some extent, they re-echo the same issues and the same dynamics that we need to explore in great detail. So I'll first of all talk about the issues of gender inequalities or gender sensitivity from the perspective of participants. What things should we put in place to ensure that we treat individuals, in a way that shows respect for individuals and that also acknowledges that there are inherent differences in gender that we must capture in our studies. So for us to be gender sensitive as researchers, we need to consider things across the entire cascade of research. So it's not an issue of we collect the data and then we say, oh, well, we're writing this manuscript now. How do we use pronouns? So it's not an issue of, it's not so much of an issue of pronouns. It's an issue of how do we give intentional consideration to issues of gender throughout the entire cascade of study design, right from when we're planning studies, before we've collected a single data point, or before we've written a single word, right from the planning phase. How do we consider issues of gender? How do we consider the issue in the phase of design, study design? So things like sampling and questionnaire design. And then when we get to analysis, how do we consider that? And then finally, in the writing, how do we also consider that? The planning stage obviously is the most critical stage of a study. That is when our biases are baked into the study, right? So if you do not consider that phase, obviously all the biases that you and your co-authors have are completely seeped into the study design. So planning phase means that we do a very comprehensive literature review. We understand the lay of the land. We can't come into the study with our own biases, otherwise that becomes confirmatory bias. So we have an open mind. The mindset should be, let's see where the data takes us. So we have a very thorough review of the literature to see what has been done and where the true gaps are. Planning also means that the way we form steering committees is balanced. For most large studies, we have steering committees. These are, people who are experts in the field. It also includes people who are, maybe live with that condition. If we're doing a study of people living with HIV, for example, our steering committee will involve people living with HIV, people who are experts in the field of HIV. Will include industry stakeholders, especially if the study is being conducted by industry, and then other researchers. The question is, how do we select the steering committee? Obviously, we want to make it so it's balanced. So even among people living with HIV, we ensure that we don't just select males only, or we don't just select young females only, because the issues affecting females are not a monolith, right? So recognizing that we want to include people across the aisle so that we get a very clear picture. The steering committee is very important because in most cases, they suggest topics that should be investigated in that research. And so if we don't consider the composition of a steering committee, then it means that we only get to have a very narrow, a very niched view of the world. And that obviously trickles down throughout the entire conduct of the study and into what is published. So the steering committee is extremely, very important in how we compose it. It should be balanced. And then in the second phase, which is the design, we want to pay attention to sampling. We can't just rely on prayer and hope that we will sample sufficient numbers of individuals who are females, especially for topics where historically women have been underrepresented in studies. We want to make sure that we are very intentional to recruit them. And the best way to do this is through stratification. We don't just leave it to chance. So this, for example, is a study that is ongoing in 29 countries. It's called the Positive Perspectives Study. It's conducted by a pharmaceutical company in collaboration with many stakeholders around the world. So I happen to be the principal investigator for this study. And so it was a very important need to ensure that we captured females. So we can't be talking about issues of HIV and aging without representing women. So how did we do it in this study? Well, we stratified. So we had two different variables we stratified on gender, men and women, and age, which is less than 50 and 50 years or older. Obviously, you want to balance the desire to have many representative groups with logistical concerns or the logistical realities. The more strata you have in your study, the larger the sample size, and the cost could become very prohibitive. In studies like this, where we might be giving incentives of up to $50 per participant, the cost could run very high, very, very fast. So it's about trade-offs, but also critical balance. So we don't want to have too many strata, but we want to make sure that we have enough strata that capture, the groups of interest, especially the minority groups. So when we have that kind of stratification, we end up with 4 main strata: men aged less than 50 years, men aged 50 years or older, females aged less than 50 years, and females aged 50 years or older. So that guarantees that we have sufficient numbers across those groups. So in this study, for example, we plan to have 25% recruitment across the 4 groups. And so that ensures that even among older women, we have sufficient numbers. So this is something we want to encourage when we're sampling, that we don't just leave it to chance and pray and hope that, we hope, fingers crossed, that we will get sufficient numbers of women. No. We have to rely on statistics at this point to ensure that during the study design, we stratify. And we don't want to confuse stratification during study design with stratification during analysis. They're the same, but they're obviously different things entirely. One is ensuring that the way we sample ensures we have enough people. The other one is simply saying, let us break down the results in our data set by so and so groups. Different things, the same name, but different things. So stratification is a very important concept to ensure that we have adequate numbers of people. It's also very important to ensure that we recognize as scientists as we don't stratify for validity. Stratification does not improve validity of results. It is simply to ensure that we have, think of it more as an equity statement to include sufficient numbers of people in our studies so that we can have precise estimates for those various groups. So that's one way one action we can take during the study design phase to ensure representation. Then, during the design phase, how we construct our questionnaires also reflects how gender sensitive we are. And this is particularly important for certain topics. So for in the world of HIV, for example, obviously it makes complete sense. And suffice it to say that this has nothing to do with our cultural orientation or religious beliefs. So it doesn't necessarily mean that as individuals, personally, we may say, oh, I don't believe in gender issues or sexual orientation, but your belief has nothing to do with the conduct of a study, especially when the study has been conducted in an international context. So for issues, for example, HIV, it will make complete sense to collect data on sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Sex refers to biological definition in terms of your chromosomes. So in this case, for example, the question here is what was recorded or designated as your sex at birth? And the options here are female, male, or intersex, or prefer not to answer. So the categories of sex are very well defined, and those are female, male, and intersex. And gender sensitivity also means that you acknowledge that some people may not feel comfortable with answering, and so it will make sense to just provide because that is sensitive information. So for those who prefer not to answer, provide them an exit strategy so that you're not coercing people to provide information that they deem as sensitive. So that's sex. Gender, however, is a social construct. And so the question here, for example, says, which of the following best represents how you currently think of yourself? So that reflects the fact that gender might change. I may be male, I may be identify as a man today, but tomorrow identify as a woman, right? Or identify as nothing. And so that fluidity has to be represented if you're capturing data on gender. And the options here will include things like man, woman, transgender, non-binary, other. Obviously, there are a whole lot of them. We can't capture all of them. So if you're collecting data on gender, it will always make sense for you to provide an other option such that when they click on that, they can now type whatever it is they identify as. So that way, you ensure that your response options are, mutually exclusive, yet collectively exhaustive, that whatever an individual identifies as, they can either find it on the options, or if they don't find it, they can select an answer. When we're collecting data on sex and gender, we also want to be very careful to ensure that we do not mix match the elements. It's very common, you see that, and sometimes people will ask for questions on, say, gender, but will introduce elements or markers of sex. So they might say, for example, which of the following best represents how you think of yourself in terms of gender, and they might have options like male, female. So it's also important to know that accuracy in research means that we keep apples for apples and oranges for oranges. The attributes or the options for gender remain with gender, and the options for sex remain with sex. So man and woman are social constructs. You talk about transitioning from boys to men. See, that's a social definition that you grow from boy to a man. It's a social assignment that tells you that man or woman are social derivatives or social constructs. And then you also need to make sure you collect data on sexual orientation for issues of, of importance like HIV. And these are not just things to check the DEI checklist. This could be confounders. So by not collecting this information, you might end up opening your study to unintended biases like omitted variable bias or unmeasured confounding. So it obviously makes sense that you capture the data. So sexual orientation, we want to make sure that we capture as many categories as possible so that it's easier to collapse the data later on than to have very sparse categories and then you can have the ability to articulate nuance in the data. So here, for example, you have gay, lesbian, heterosexual, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, other, and so on. So individuals who feel a particular way can select other. And again, to acknowledge that this is a sensitive question, we have an exit clause here, prefer not to answer, so that people who don't want to reveal their identity can select that option and move on. Gender sensitivity also means that on the flip side, when we are collecting data in a population where individuals who identify this way are a minority, we do not report data in a way that is potentially identifying. So in terms of ethical review, we talk about things that are identifiers or potential identifiers. The word potential is important because something may not be a direct identifier because it's not a metric at an individual level. And identifier may be things like your name, your social security number, your address, your email. So those are direct identifiers. But you might have things like your sexual orientation, which are not necessarily direct identifiers, but within a particular context, they could become identifiers. You can imagine a village where there's only one guy who is gay, and you collect response and you say, oh, this is what the data is anonymized, sure, but this is what the gay guy said. Everybody says, yeah, we know exactly who said that. So gender sensitivity also means that on the flip side, we consider issues of potential disclosure of individuals' privacy when we collect this. So it's not just looking at protected information, it's also looking at sensitive information, because that's a distinction that sometimes we get too caught up with. Oh, it's not protected. Because protected information are records that are protected by law. So, but not everything that is not, some things are not protected, but are still important. Sexual orientation is not protected, but it's sensitive. So it's not just focusing on whether things are protected by law, like your medical records, for example, are protected. But we also want to consider issues of sensitivity or things that may not necessarily be protected, but still sensitive. And sensitive means that if somebody were to know of this information, that will cause the individual some kind of harm, whether it's social harm or psychological harm or financial harm. Because in some contexts, knowing that somebody is gay could mean that they are persecuted, they lose their job, they might even lose their life. So, it's something we want to pay close attention to. So the bottom line is that we have to take this into context. Where context allows, we want to collect the information and report it, especially when they are also confounders of the scientific relationship we're trying to measure. But on the flip side, we also want to consider issues of privacy and identifiability of data, especially when we're working in populations where any of these things could become potential identifiers. Now, we've talked about in the pre-design phase and the design phase. Now we're moving to analysis. When we're doing analysis, we also want to consider issues of gender. Typically in analysis, when people consider gender, they think of gender as a confounder. And so you'll see things like, oh, we adjusted for age, sex, and whatever. So in that case, you're treating gender as a confounder. But what we're interested today is saying that it's not enough to just treat gender as a confounder. We want to look at gender also as an effect modifier. And that's where the value comes. That's where we tie gender and issues of gender sensitivity together, right? Just adjusting for gender or controlling for gender as a confounder does not make your study gender sensitive. It just means that your study is rigorous in terms of biases. Effect modification says that, and for those of us who may not be very familiar with this epidemiology concept, let me quickly explain. We determine confounding when we compare crude results with adjusted results. So if we say, for example, that gender is a confounder, we take the crude results, which are not adjusted for gender, and we compare the results after adjusting for gender. And if there's maybe a 10% difference or more, we say that, oh, wow, gender is the confounder of the relationship. So confounding is crude versus adjusted. In effect modification, however, we're looking at the relationship between the exposure and the outcome in group A versus in group B. So for example, if our study is looking at the relationship between smoking and lung cancer, we're looking at that relationship among males, and then we're looking at that relationship among females, and we're saying, are they different? If they're different, that suggests a lot of things. It might suggest that maybe there is a amplification of the result in one group due to whatever reason, maybe dietary reasons or hormonal issues, or many things could provide that amplification that makes the results different from one group versus another. However, we will never know that if we do not assess for effect modification. We also call effect modification interaction, right? So the bottom line of what we're trying to say is that one way we show that we are gender sensitive is through exploring for effect modification. Confounding confounders are a nuisance variable. We hate confounders, but we love effect modifiers. It's a biological relationship. It shows that there's something going on here that we should explore further. So that is definitely one way we can show as gender sensitive in our research, by exploring not just for confounding by gender, but importantly, exploring for effect modification by gender as well. And then in writing, we also show that we're gender sensitive by showing respect for individuals. So in general, not just for issues of males or females, in general, there are some etiquette we want to observe. We don't want to call people subjects. We want to call them participants. Subjects sound as if they're elaborate, right? It also makes them sound as passive partners. But a participant is actively providing information, so they can be a subject. We don't want to call people patients or diabetes patients. A people first language means we call them people first, followed by the disease. So we don't say diabetic patients or HIV patients or HIV people, because in that kind of context, we're putting the disease before the person. So a person first approach will say people living with HIV or people living with cancer, not cancer patients. Same thing, high-risk individuals. That sounds like, oh, this person is really bad person, So individuals at high risk for XYZ, not qualifying them with a negative attribute first. And then in general, individuals, not cases. A case is a diagnosis of a particular thing. And so we want to, in general, refer to people as individuals rather than calling them, oh, we had 4, cases. In general, there may be contexts where cases might be appropriate, but in most cases, it's not appropriate. Then in general, drilling down to issues of gender, we want to use language that removes that default as males in societal contexts. Because we're talking about bridging inequalities. So how do we do that? Well, we look with our language matters, framing of things matters, because certain terms just solidify the impression that, well, it has to be a man that is here. So for example, chairperson, chairperson, that's neutral, obviously, than saying chairman. Chairman just assumes that must be a man. The same thing with middle person. Instead of middleman, when we say man-made, okay, what if it was made by a woman? So we refer to that as artificial. Personnel instead of manpower, right? So even in small ways, we show that we are gender sensitive by using language that is gender neutral and that removes that social defaulting to males. So this is how we show that we're gender sensitive in how we do research with participants. Now, like we said, there are 2 sides to every coin. In this coin, we're looking at it from 2 frameworks. One, the participants, which we've just examined now. I want to flip now and look at it from the other domain, which is the investigators. How do we ensure that we are gender sensitive, both as individuals and as institutions, in how we either conduct research or we support research at our institutions? So I'll focus a bit on Nigeria, well, because we're Nigerians here mostly. So This is data from the National Population Commission. Bottom line here, you see that male, females, 50-50, well, plus or minus small differences. So the gender distribution is more or less the same. So in an ideal world, we'll expect that those distributions will be propagated to every other scenario, that there will be at least near, equality in, positions of power or things that influence the research dynamics. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at, for example, distribution of vice chancellors, both ever and current. Historically, ever, just 5.3% of the vice chancellors ever produced in Nigeria have been females, according to reports from the media. And currently 4.4%. Now, that is a very far cry from the distributions we saw earlier that were balanced. So the question then is, why? Why do we have such disproportionate inequality, both historically as well as currently? The same thing applies to when we look at the distribution of the female fellows of the Nigerian Academy of Science. So I looked at this, and they have on their website the names and the gender, which is something we should really applaud, that there's this intentional effort to capture data on gender. So that was something that I really, when I was preparing for this lecture, and I went through some data sets, some national records, I thought that was great, that most things had gender attached to them, which is great, because if we can't capture gender or gender inequalities, how then do we assess and report that these inequalities exist in our society and that we should address them? So I think that's something very commendable that we're doing, and that should be encouraged in our other domains as well. We should capture information on gender where we can. But on the other side, the representation is not even close to the representation of the country overall. Only 10% of the members, at least the reported members on this forum, are females, which in no shape or form represents the distribution across the country. So that shows there's clearly room for improvement in this regard. And this is important because we can't talk about the conduct of science or the conduct of research without talking about the stakeholders in authority, because this propagates downwards. The people at the top determines what is researched, the resources that are attached to so and so, down to who gets put in positions of authority. So it is of interest that we look at those things, because we can't talk about gender sensitivity in research without talking about the power mechanisms that control research. And that's the reason why we're talking about that. Now, I was also interested in how do these differences emerge? We're talking about, there's disproportionate distribution of males and females in the top positions, but where does it begin? So that was what I was interested in. So I looked at the JAM data to look at not the distribution of students who were admitted by different specialties. The first thing that caught my concern was in engineering sciences, you have 281, for example, out of total of 1,970. That is a very, very small percentage. And that is concerning, because we're talking about the jobs of tomorrow. Everybody talks about the jobs of tomorrow, engineering and AI and technology. This is problematic for the country in terms of gender preparedness, or the potential for increasing gender inequalities, because these numbers, these proportions are not healthy at all. So the question is, how do we drive up enrollment in the hard sciences, engineering, and technology? I work in the tech space, so that was where my eyes first went. And I'm like, wow, we have to do better in that regard. And then also looking at what happens in between. If you look back at the data here, I was also interested in this. What happens in between? When we look at this data, medicine, pharmacy, the health sciences, we see that there is a disproportionate, representation of females, right? 1,195 of these, individuals are females. So that makes up about 36%. So the question is that advantage by females preserved across time? So remember, most of them here are females. Only 36% are males, right? The rest are females. So the question is, how does that advantage, does it preserve over time? Well, we don't have all the data to piece together the story, but I was interested to explore it with the data available. So I looked at the records from the West African College of Surgeons. Now, this is not representative of everybody here in the health sciences, but it still tells us some interesting story. In this particular cross-section of individuals who were eligible for the exam, I was interested in seeing, okay, this is the distribution that came in. So the question is, what was the distribution that went out at the end of the whole story? Well, we see a completely different story. Here we see that 36% of all the eligible candidates were females. But what happened? Remember, 36% were males who were admitted, and then we're seeing a complete flip over where the story has completely reversed. Now, when we're interpreting data like this, we want to be mindful of a kind of bias, selection bias we call survival bias. Survival bias simply says, oh, you are looking at just the people who survived the event, and that tells you a very warped story, tells you a very slanted story. Like in World War II, when they looked at the planes that were coming back alive, and looked at the places where the planes had been fired, where they had bullet, marks, and they were like, oh, let's reinforce those parts of the plane. But that's a very biased way of thinking, because what you should really be worried about is the planes that did not come back. Where were they shot, right? Maybe these places that these ones have been shot and still came back reflects non-fatal areas of the plane. So in the same way, when we're looking at stories of a journey, we need to look at what happened, what possibly happened in between, because that's where the meat of the story lies, not just the beginning or the end, but what happened in between, right? So again, this is what we saw at the beginning. 36% of those who came in were males, and then at the end, we saw that they were mostly women. So mostly women came in, mostly men went out. What happened? Well, there are many alternative explanations to this story. It's possible that many women came in, but maybe they did not finish medical school. Maybe they did not get into a residency program. Maybe they got into a residency program, but were not qualified to challenge the exam. Or it's possible that we have a disproportionate distribution of those who go into the health sciences. That JAM number that said, the vast majority were females. Maybe when we drill down by discipline, maybe we'll see a different story. Maybe we have in the medical science or medicine, it's predominantly male still. Well, we don't know this, we don't know the answers, right? But this is just hypothesis generating to say, we see a problem, at least looking at the broad picture, that something happens in between the way that is not to the advantage of females, that disadvantages female in one way or the other. And for us to be able to address those issues, we obviously need data. We need to, drill down into the mechanics of it and address it. But it's likely, however, that, postgraduate enrollment is quite small for females, because this is also data from the federal government showing that, the percentage of postgraduate enrollment in Nigeria largely lies with males, right? So it doesn't matter so much about women getting enrolled in undergraduate. The reality is that at postgraduate, it seems that it's predominantly a man's world. The question is why? And perhaps some of these differences are attributable to cultural issues, and we need to look at how do we empower women in those regards. And that is why we need to map out strategies that look at the issues from across board. How do we create societal impact in our local communities? How do we create academic excellence, taking note that males and females do not have the same responsibilities culturally, right? There's an imbalance. Like I said earlier, a man and a woman might be doing a residency program. The man might work all day long and not even bother about going home. The woman still has to worry about, oh, the kids, oh, I have to cook meals, oh, I have to do this. How do we factor all of those things in designing a more just world? A world that acknowledges that those differences, those additional responsibilities could mean less advantage in terms of career or profession. And so those are the different facets we need to address. So we need to meet people where they are. And so that means turning a new page. And, we can't talk about equity approaches without contrasting with equality. Sometimes people use those two terms interchangeably, but it mean very different things. Equality, like you see here, means everybody's standing on an equal plane. And so this short guy obviously cannot see, because even though they all have an equal platform, he's still short. Equity means that we stack the deck for people who are disadvantaged, right? This guy here doesn't really need anything because he can see already. And an equity approach means that we provide we meet people where they are so that they can see. And so that means that how do we structure things societally and institutionally so that people can see? And so that comes through partnerships, processes, products, and people. We have to think of those 4 domains. Processes means that as institutions, we need to come up with processes that explicitly support women. And, supporting women doesn't mean that we are, not supporting men, but it means that we, again, remember in an equity approach, we go out of our way to say, how can we put into place policies? And again, remember, if it is not written, it does not exist. So in your institution, are there documents, are there policies, written policies that show how, the institution supports women in different ways? So that could, for example, mean policies against sexual harassment. It would mean policies that ensure gender representation in leadership, right? Those things have to be written down for them to carry any weight of law. And also partnerships. We talked about recruiting women in studies. Well, you don't just recruit women out of the sky. You have to partner with organizations. So in studies we sometimes work with hundreds of organizations that are specific to women's causes. And that's how we then recruit women in large numbers. And so from the research perspective, partnerships means we work with those organizations in a way that it's a win-win. It also means that we prioritize funding for topics related to women's health, and that will promote mentorship and industry partnerships. Again, collaborate doesn't necessarily mean that we have to become echo chambers. The goal is not to corroborate our stories, but to push each other. There has to be push and pull. We have to be comfortable with that. And so that is a prerequisite for making sure we partner successfully. And then for people, making sure that we create infrastructure. At CDC, they used to have a special daycare center for women, so that if you had a child, you don't have to go off to go and drop your child at school and then you run off to come and go to work. So this kind of institutional policies that say, okay, we are going to support women this way. And even in terms of infrastructure, there's a gradual shift, especially in the Western world, where now, for example, bathrooms or toilets, it's not, daycare or baby changing centers are not just in the women's bathrooms, right? Even the males have facilities to change a diaper. That's just a social signaling that, well, it's not just a woman's responsibility to do those things, but also, everybody's responsibility. And then how do institutions or departments provide time off and adequate work-life balance and other interventions that are culturally appropriate? And then products. Product means that we leverage technology. People are busy, women particularly may be very, very busy with many responsibilities. So this may not be the time to say, oh, you know what, you should go and learn Python, or you should go and learn R, or you should go and, no. How do we create technology that enables people to deliver? For example, if somebody's in a residency, they're expected to do science, but they may not have formal training in science. They just went to med school. And so that formal training may not be there. So product simply means, how do we create technology? How do we use technology as a bridge to create equity interventions? This is, in my opinion, what literally means when we meet people where they are, not where we want them to be. And so this is an announcement. We're launching the HighSpace platform next week, 30th of 29th of May. And that's one of our own approaches to addressing issues like that. I won't talk too much about the launch, but just to say that is
Sorry, Prof, should be running
mechanism we're going to use to address issues of equity. As you shall see during the launch, we've made it possible for individuals to write a full manuscript in just a couple of hours. And we are not talking about AI here, right? So this is how we use technology to solve problems. I believe that well-written code, when executed very well, is magic. When we think of magic, we think of supernatural things. Well, I happen to believe that code can achieve that same level of, attainment of magic, or doing things that are just extraordinary, or things we never imagined were possible. So that's the power that lies in technology, and we can definitely use that to bridge some of the equity gap. So at the end of the day, it's about being innovative. Innovation, Theodore Levy, who was a professor at the Harvard Business School, says creativity is just thinking up new things, where innovation is doing new things. So as institutions, as departments, as individuals, how do we become more innovative in helping to reduce that gap between the genders and create a more just world? All right, that's the end of my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Agaku, for that brilliant session. It was a good time. Please, let's have our questions in the chat box, in the Q&A session. Put in your questions, your reactions, your comments. You can clap, you can give the emoji of thumbs up. Let me quickly take us through some of the striking things that I got. When it was talking about being gender sensitive, it talks about focusing on sometimes our participants. And we shouldn't start when we get to the field. We should start at the point of planning. We should start with the group of people that will bring together to be in the steering committee. So it's important to bring males, females, and the marginalized. Also, it talks about that as it runs through planning, design, analysis, and writing. And he also talks about being very clear about the understanding in the differences that exist between gender, sex, and sexual orientation. I've seen this again and again with our students that we think the three are the same. We have to be conscious of the differences between gender, sex, gender, and sexual orientation, and not give a mismatch to the response categories under them. He also talks about showing respect to people in our language while we write as people in the academy. It's important to note that we should be conscious of saying people living with cancer, people living with diabetes, people living with physical disabilities, rather than saying the physically challenged. And also we should use gender neutral labels, such as chairperson. One example that struck me was the artificial as against the man-made. I never thought of that as, so we have to be conscious in our thought. Please, as we go over this, if you have questions, let's read. I have some questions here. For me, the illustration of equity is where the focus should be. This will help direct and drive support to facilitate women and other disadvantaged persons to get to the expected levels. The use of research findings is key here. Research will help bring all the policies to life. That is a gap that exists and needs to be bridged. Thank you very much, Comfort, for that comment. Alaji is asking, please, where do we write? Oh, all right, that's not a question for us. All right, so let me ask this question, sir. We all know that majority of the universities now have gender policies. It's one thing to have policies, it's a big deal to have implementation of policies. How do we move from drafting beautifully written gender policies, sexual harassment policies, to strict implementations in our institutions?
So I think that for the policy to have bite, one, people need to feel that they are in a safe space. You can imagine a scenario where somebody goes and reports a case, and then they're like, oh yeah, this was the person that there was a student that the person becomes persecuted. So that will not work. So I think it becomes very important that we really mean it. So it takes leadership, it takes moral courage to say, yes, this is how we're going to do this. And practical ways. One, having an ombudsman office that says this office is for reporting issues that involve gender, but sometimes we create these policies, but we don't put into place mechanisms to ensure they are implemented. So if you just have paper, that will not work. Do you have an office where students or people can report if they are victims of let's say harassment? Do you have a mechanism to investigate that? And is there a mechanism to for example, discipline? And sometimes in the absence of a clear, let's say disciplinary measure, it becomes just bark and no bite. So I think institutions really have to mean it, and dedicate resources towards it to ensure that that happens. Because to investigate things of that nature, you need funding. So if you have a policy but there's no office for it, no funding for it, no official designated as the person for this, well, it doesn't really suggest that you are serious about it, because even if it goes to a court of law, that and this is where even companies suffer, because somebody, a patient or an employee files a case of sexual harassment or whatever case that was, or discrimination. The burden is on that company to prove that they had put in very strict measures in place to prevent that. Because if they take you to court now, whether it's a civil suit or a criminal suit, and you had nothing, you just say, "Oh, we had an SOP to prevent this." Oh, just an SOP. What other things? If there's no evidence that you put into place specific things, you have to pay millions of dollars in damages, because it's very clear that you supported that by doing nothing. So doing nothing is a clear statement that you support it. And so institutions likewise will have to show, by their deeds, that they truly are against that kind of behavior.
Thank you very much for that beautiful response. Another question from Professor Ukmong. She says, thanks for a thought-provoking session. Within the context of Africa, are there male/men issues that we need to be concerned about when we talk about, or when we take care of gender issues? Over, sir.
Yeah. So gender issues, of course, naturally, we always incline discussion towards females, because we feel females have suffered historical damage and we need to offset that. But yes, even in African context, there are issues, especially in the context of outbreak response. For example, in Sierra Leone, one of the large cohort studies that we set up we call it the men's health study, because we found that even after Ebola was cleared from the bloodstream, it still remained in certain protected spaces, right? And so men could still pass Ebola on through sperm, even after Ebola had been cleared from the bloodstream. And so recognizing the biology will mean that we are aware, at least we suspect that some of these things might be issues that we need to address. So that is just one. But beyond the biological issues, I think there are also the social, dimensions, especially for, in African society, males generally, especially the firstborn children, tend to adopt they're now like they carry the whole responsibility of the family, and they do it so well. They do it without complaining. But some of that is just internalized. So we've never bothered to see how does this thing affect the mental health over long term, because we sort of almost equate mental health to issues of weakness that belongs to the Western world. But I think that given our unique position in Africa, and especially when you have just generational poverty, and the first person that breaks out, especially the man, is now expected to somehow fix all his family problems. I think it's very important to look at how does this pan out? How does this influence mental health behavior? Just for individuals like that. So I think our unique societal structure, the fact that we are very cohesive socially, is a good thing, but also it creates unique challenges, especially for men, which just has not been studied ever, because we just accept that, well, that's their role, that's their role in society, and God help them. But we need to study that scientists, because it's God help them, sure, but we also need to measure how that influences their health.
Thank you. Please, last question. I'll apologize to the participants. We have lots of questions rolling in, so it shows to you, sir, that you've done well. When students ask questions, it means that it's an engaging and interesting conversation. All right, so permit me to ask this last question for time, or two. I'll pack them together. So the first one is it compulsory to respect gender balance in a public health research? That's one question. And then the last one that I would allow is regarding gender sensitivity in some countries in Africa where homosexuality is forbidden. Is it advisable to put on a questionnaire? What is your gender? Male, female, transgender, etc. Over to you, sir.
All right, thanks. So the way we practice inclusion or gender equality could potentially increase mediocrity in our institutions if we're not careful. Because in the name of achieving a numerical balance, you just say, oh, well, just, okay, you're female, just come in, right? That is not what we're saying. We're saying that how do you empower people, right? If we were to hire a bunch of, let's say I wanted to hire software engineers in my company. Well, the probability that it's going to be males is almost 90 to 100%. Why? The pool of engineers is predominantly male. So I'm not saying that go and hire a mediocre female engineer just because you want to achieve balance. I'm saying that right from the world stream, how do we correct the problem that just a small percentage of people applying for engineering in JAM are females? That is the problem. That trickles down to me hiring a male engineer. So the problem is not fixing by just hiring any female that comes along and can't write any decent code. The problem is fixing those downstream problems. I say, how do we empower females to enroll more into engineering, into STEM, so that we solve those problems downstream? So we are not at all preaching mediocrity here. Like, the best person should get the job, right? Whether it's a man or a woman. But as a society, we should put in mechanisms to ensure that that pool of eligible candidates is well balanced. Then the other question about homosexuality bans, yeah, that's the issue of sensitivity. And so no, in that kind of context, it will not be appropriate, and no IRB should even approve that, because you are putting the individual's life in danger by asking them. And even if you ask, you're not going to get the correct response anyway. So when we design questionnaires, we also have to think about possible sources of biases. And when you know that this question is doomed right from the start, well, perhaps you should not ask it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for those responses. Please, would beg you to please go to the chat box and try to respond there, and they keep popping in. So please do that for us. Over to you, Dr. Kudus Lawal. Thank you very much for having us this session.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you very much, Professor Agaku, for that beautiful presentation. We'll now proceed on a 5 minutes break, and we'll start the abstract session on top of the hour. Thank you very much. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this conference. Welcome to the session of the next session of second day on maternal health. I'm called Dr. Jolie Beyeza, the chair of this session. And to introduce myself, I'm a senior consultant at Women's Hospital in Kampala and also chair for childbirth and PPH at FIGO. Today we have this interesting session. The session will explore critical issues affecting women's health, maternal health, including healthcare access, reproductive rights, gender-based violence, support and leadership equity. Studies presented here expose deep-rooted structural and systemic barriers ranging from poor education and income to inadequate training and resource constraints that limit women's outcomes across both urban and rural settings. Collectively, the studies underscore the urgent need for systemic reform, gender-responsive leadership, investments in health education, and undergraduate research capacity to drive evidence-based solutions. Before we start, participants kindly remember to drop your questions in the chat box. So we'll start with our first speaker, who is going to introduce herself or himself. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. Forgive me, Uganda, when we see names, we know whether they are women or men, but here, treat me as a foreigner. So Taratu will expose something on barriers to effective implementation of quality of care for reproductive, maternal, newborn, and child health services in labor ward at Sani Abacha Hospital. Taratu, please briefly introduce yourself, take on the stage.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Please let me stand on the existing protocol. My name is Taratu Ramatu Ndaki. I am from Bayero University, Kano. I work with the Yobe State Ministry of Health and Human Resources, precisely in the College of Nursing Sciences, Damatru, Yobe State. Welcome, everyone. The title of my research is Barriers to Effective Implementation of Reproductive Maternal Newborn Child and Quality of Care in Yobe State Labor Wards, Nigeria. Okay, Yobe State is known for a high maternal mortality rate. It is the second in Nigeria with the highest maternal mortality ratio. We are also known as the pride of the Sahel. My friend's sister-in-law, a 19-year-old primigravida, she was pregnant, she was carrying twin pregnancy and went into labor one morning at 7 a.m. The husband left her to the care of his mother, and she was sure to tell the mother-in-law that she's in labor. So she labored. The mother-in-law was not aware of it until the early hours of until the late hours of that day. And she labored until 11 p.m. when she expelled the first baby. The second baby was transverse line, and she couldn't expel that baby, deliver the baby. Until 5 a.m., she was still laboring and bleeding from the cord. After that, the mother-in-law now called for the sister-in-law, who is a nurse midwife, to come and see her. The sister-in-law, what she did was just to transfer her to the hospital, from the hospital to the labor ward. The labor ward team rallied around and took her to the theater for emergency cesarean section. Fortunately, she survived the operation with 2 pints of blood in the theater and 2 pints of blood in the postnatal ward. So this is, and we lost the second twin. So these are the kind of situations that we see in Yobe State. Next slide, please. Next. Those are the situation of things we see in Yobe State. Out of 9,482 women that report to the hospital for antenatal care, only 3,572 reported for hospital delivery. Most of those that did not come from the hospital delivery must have delivered under the traditional birth attendants. They probably must have died from laboring at home because they feel it is more dignified to deliver at home than to come to the hospital according to their culture. Apart from that, you end up, some of them will not come for hospital for treatment. Things like anemia, malaria, then the ones that end up killing them is pre-eclampsia, eclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage, and then grand mortality because we have very low contraceptive prevalence in Yobe State. And then in the hospital too, we have other concerns like non-functional equipment, lack or unavailability of essential drugs, inadequate staffings, most especially the professional staffs. So Yobe State could do it, following the roadmap planned by WHO for reproductive, maternal, and newborn health care. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Talatu. Members, please remember to write her questions in the chat box. Next, second presenter, we have Mary. She will talk about the silenced voices of women. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Adisola Gumsola Mary, and the title of my thesis is The Silent Voice of Women Through Elective and Appointed Positions in Osun State, Nigeria. During the 2022 governorship election, the campaign was loud and colorful, but something was missing. Women were missing. Not a single woman won the election of 2022, not even the following elections of 2023. That was the State House of Assembly election in Osun State. So this sparks a question in my mind. If women are not being elected, at least are they being appointed? And what factors influence this? To explore this, I decided to do a cross-sectional study that is interviewing 15 participants drawn from 4 different political parties, from women politicians, from electoral officials, from civil society groups, and also from Center of Gender Studies and Social Policy, Obafemi Awolowo University. And after doing this research, what I discovered was that women has 0% in elective seats, but in appointed seats, we have 11 out of 69 women, making a percentage of 15.9% of women in appointed positions. So the next question I would like to ask, why is it that we have more women in appointed than in elective positions? So I was able to do some interviews, and gotten from the people I interviewed, I discovered that godfatherism is the reason. I discovered that lack of financial resources is the reason. I discovered that family background is the reason. I discovered that internal party dynamics is a reason. I also discovered that cultural norms is also a reason that limits the reason why we have more women going for appointed position, because when women don't have the financial capacity, they rather lobby for appointed position because they know they don't even have the chance of getting into elective positions, even though some political parties give them waiver in the sense that they give them free nomination fee, but they don't have the campaign fund, the campaign money to be able to fund themselves in election. So they just look for a way to lobby themselves through appointed solutions. So in conclusion, what I discovered in my research is that we have more representation of women in appointed positions than in elective positions. For a way forward, I would actually recommend for a political party reforms in the sense that there should be inclusiveness of women within the political party first. Starting from that, then it can now begin to affect elections, then to the whole governance place. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. You didn't introduce yourself though. Members, please put questions for Mary in the chat box. The third speaker is Miracle. Miracle, please briefly introduce yourself and tell us about factors associated with the tuberculosis awareness among women. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Okeke Miracle, working with Enugu State University Teaching Hospital. I'll be talking on factors that affect primary healthcare access and the impact on the knowledge of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is among the top 10 leading cause of death worldwide. Nigeria ranked the first in Africa in terms of tuberculosis burden and sixth in the world. And tuberculosis ravages most of those rural communities because all the factors that affect tuberculosis, they are well spelled there. There's overcrowding, lack of education, poverty. So that's where the burden, and then the primary health care available, they don't make access to it. So it bothered me that, do they make access to primary health care facility? If they do, what is the impact of the access on the knowledge of tuberculosis? So a study found out that 47% of the women we recruited had poor access to primary health care facility. And the factors that affected this included, one, the type of marriages. Those who are in monogamous marriage had a better access as compared to those who are in polygamous marriages. Then their occupation, those who had skill level, better occupation, were more informed compared to those who weren't. Then their monthly income. Of course, tuberculosis is a disease of the poor. And the type of residents, those who live in their own homes, had rooms, so they stay one person per room or two, as compared to those who live in house where they stay 8 or more in a room. These were factors that affected the access to primary health care facility. We also found out that 60% of this populace had poor knowledge of tuberculosis in terms of what causes tuberculosis, has been transmitted, the factors that affect it, if it's treatable. Some even believe that is given by witchcraft. Some feel like they can treat it with herbal medications. So the factors that affected their level of knowledge includes the educational level. Those who are more educated were able to read and have valid information as compared to those who those who are not educated. Then the number of rooms as well in their homes also affected the level of their knowledge. As I said again, the index of health in rural community can be determined by the level of access to primary health care facility. Primary health care serves as a hub of information dissemination, and the level of awareness can lead to either early detection, and that will lead to early treatment. But if you don't have awareness of this disease, there will be inability for them to even present early. And then in the facility itself, the primary healthcare facility, when they access the facility, so the facility have the equipment in terms of capacity, manpower, to even educate them on tuberculosis so that they can equip them and they cannot transmit that. So in conclusion, having seen that the factors that affect tuberculosis includes occupation, the level of education, and the number of rooms, we would recommend that the government would try to equip, first of all, the primary healthcare facilities.
1 minute more.
Then the partnership, the government should also partner with the the health workers, the community leaders, so that they can take this message to those who really need it. Also, there should be monitoring and evaluation team that we place in check to see that these policies that have been enacted are actually functional. Then also, I want to recommend to health workers to increase the level of education, this public awareness campaign, educating the populace about the spread of tuberculosis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miracle. Presenters, please stick to your time allocated. The next presenter is Doshima, and she'll talk about a survey on accident and emergency nurses' assessment of rape survivors. Doshima, please take the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good afternoon, all. My name is Doshima Bahabo from the University of Lagos. I can't take it. I can't take it no more, nurse. Am I the one? Don't tell me. Tell me I'm dreaming. It cannot be me. I'm dreaming. I was not raped. It's not me. I'm just dreaming. When I wake up, tell me everything will be all right. Calm down, madam. Just calm down. Calm down. No, I can't take it. I can't go on living like this. I can't go on. I trusted my uncle. He raped me. I can't take it. I'd rather die. Madam, please calm down. Come, please sit down and let's discuss. It is a scenario such like this that brought about this study, which evaluated the accident and emergency nurses' competency in rape survivors assessment. So it is a fact that accurate nursing assessments are vital for rape survivors for many reasons. Because of this, we interviewed hospital. We wanted to know their level of understanding of rape, of their knowledge of rape. We wanted to know if they were familiar with rape assessment tools. And we also wanted to know if they were competent, if they felt competent in assessing rape victims. We found that a good number of them had good knowledge of rape. A good number also were familiar with the rape assessment tools. And about 16, that is 55.3%, had high competence in assessment. There was also a significant association between knowledge of rape and competence. However, there was no association between nursing specialties and competence. Efficient rape victims assessment are very crucial for minimizing psychological trauma, because rape comes with very dire consequences. Women who are raped, who are victims of rape, turn out to have emotional or psychological problems, which go on to affect their daily living styles. Sorry, excuse me. Also, so what did our results show us? Our study underscored the critical importance of accurate and sensitive assessment of survivors. If nurses are not trained to carry out this emotional burden of victims, because when they assess victims, they too are affected, they are psychologically affected, and so they must be trained to get the correct data that will help in managing this situation. Because a data that does not get good information that will give rise to good management may be compounding the psychological trauma on the victims of rape. Thus, focusing on deepening the knowledge and appropriate assessment techniques, nurses will be provided or will be empowered to provide even more effective and compassionate care, ultimately minimizing the psychological trauma and promoting or reducing mental health conditions. The approach we used was to give questionnaires to these 30 nurses. Among these 30 nurses, 4 of them were male and 26 were female. So we gave questionnaire to them. These questionnaires had been validated before we made sure that they were reliable and fit for assessment of the activity we wanted to do. So we are encouraging that all hospitals who have nurses who are assessing rape victims to be trained appropriately, to assess rape victims. Thank you very much.
I almost ran thinking they are raping someone. Thank you very much, Dushima. This was great, great. So let's get the second presenter. No, the next presenter. I think this is the fifth. And this is Oluwaleke, who is going to tell us about perception, predictors of non-compliance to postnatal visits among mothers in a maternity teaching hospital. Thank you so much, Ade. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayobami Adiago, working with teaching hospital at Adia Teaching Hospital. Imagine Amino, a 30-year-old mother of two, living at the outskirts of Ibadan. After her recent delivery, she was told to return to the hospital for postnatal care. She knew the importance of it and that the journey required about 2:30 to get to the hospital. Her husband had just resumed work after unpaid leave. The cultural expectation demands that Amina to stay home for 40 days, indoor. And no one would offer to watch after the newborn. Amina decided to stay indoor. Amina's story is not quite different, but the story represents the dilemma of every Nigerian mothers who knows and understands the values of postnatal care, but faced with invisible factors that prevent them from showing up. My study, I conducted a cross-sectional study at Adeoyo Maternity Teaching Hospital, Ibadan. The aim was clear: to understand, to assess the perception of mothers and real-world factors that is preventing them from coming to the clinics. So I found out the results from this study were quite encouraging and alarming. On the brighter side, 90% of the mothers, they know the impacts and the values of postnatal care for both the mother and the newborn, and how it helps in order to assess health risk early. On the other side of the coin, I discovered that more than average of these participants, they had good knowledge about postnatal care. But I discovered that knowledge empower. Knowledge alone is not important. The problem of the mothers is not ignorance. The problem is access, is infrastructure. The problem is cultural beliefs. And the problem is work obligations. And the problem is policy. So a culturally sensitive campaign, that showcase mothers that have benefited from postnatal care.
So thank you very much. I think we've lost him. We might have to go to the next speaker. Yeah, looks like he's not coming back. So
then friendly to implement workplace friendly
Madam Chair, please let's proceed to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought so. Thank you very much. So thank you, though you didn't have good network. Our next speaker is Rachel. Rachel is easier for me to say. She's going to tell us about breast cancer knowledge and screening practices. I won't read the whole thing. We are running short of time. Mary, go ahead, introduce yourself, and then you tell us about your study.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Olufmilayo Udieni. I work with Christian University at the Faculty of Nursing, and I'm here to present the outcome of my research and the doctoral titled Breast Cancer Knowledge and Screening Practices Among Rural Women in Ogun State, Nigeria, a quasi-experimental study. Before now, I found that some women known and close to me were dying of breast cancer, including a very young youth couple, and then another one with breast mastectomy. And some visits to the village during medical outreaches, we found out that they were just enclosed with myths. Most of them don't know the causes, neither they even know the knowledge about breast cancer, and majority of them are not aware of any screening practices on breast cancer. And so, and we know that breast cancer is the leading cause of death among women in Nigeria, and the burden of breast cancer is increasing in Nigeria with a record of 28,380 new cases. And then community-based education has proven effective in increasing awareness about early detection of breast cancer, but its effect in rural Nigeria is limited. And so our study with my authors aims to evaluate the feasibility of conducting peer education to improve breast cancer screening practices. And so during this project, 59 participants, 27 intervention and 32 control were recruited for the study. And then they were trained by peer educators. And at the end of the program, the intervention group showed significant improvements in the breast cancer knowledge with 17% increase, general breast cancer knowledge with 13% increase, and screening perception with 9% increase, and breast self-examination practice with 281.9% increase. And so in conclusion, we found out that community-based peer education effectively enhanced breast cancer awareness, perception, and self-examination practices, and also even some other breast cancer screening methods among rural dwellers in Ogun State. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Rachel. I think we've come to the end of the presentations. And ladies and gentlemen, those who have written in the chat box, the questions, we are going to address them. In case you have something else, please check it in, put it in, we will address it. Thank you, speakers. I thank you very much. And I believe you've done your best in the light of the time. Let's first address the questions that are in the chat box, and we'll start with the Miracle. Miracle, what was your method of data collection? Was it a desk review? If not, what was your sample size? And another one, do you have literature backing up the claim that tuberculosis is a disease of the poor? And I think you had many questions. There was another one below which says, thanks Miracle for the information, TB. Please, health workers usually available? So you could answer those and then we go to someone else. Miracle, come on. Is Miracle around or have not been heard?
You have been heard. Miracle's on the call. You are submitted now. Thank you.
Or she has submitted on the call?
He's on the call. He has submitted. He's going to speak now.
Okay, so.
Miracle, please
Tarat.
proceed.
Yes,
I didn't get,
Tarat.
I didn't get the question, please.
Miracle, you are delaying us. I had 3 questions for you. One was about the sampling of your study use, or was it a desk review? What was the sample size? And then the other one is, do you have literature backing up the claim that tuberculosis is a disease of the poor? And the last one about the TB, are health providers or health workers usually available at primary health care facilities? I hope that is what PHC means.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please, Miracle.
Thank you very much. So for the method of my data collection, we use the ODK, which is called an online data kit or open data kit. So we had a questionnaire that was validated. Then we transformed it into a software and placed it in a device. Then had people we trained, about 8 students who followed us into the place. Then let me mention that this study was done in Olu, as in Imo State. And for the past few years, this has been the hub of the separatist group they call the IPOB. So my sampling method also was convenient sampling because of this insecurity and proximity to the area. So we use an open data kit to get our data. That's how we collected our data. Then the sample size, we repeated 430 women. Then for the literature that back up tuberculosis as disease of the poor, yes, a study done by Safio in 2022, titled "Tuberculosis is the Oldest Pandemic and Poverty Make It Happen." Another study also done 2014 also stated tuberculosis an ailment of the poor, and there are other studies that actually buttress that. Then for the question that asks if doctors or health workers in primary health care facilities, that is why study like this is very important, because their safety is not so guaranteed given the insecurity available in the rural environment. Then the salary is not so attractive. Their counterparts in the urban community are paid higher. So doctors or health workers don't find primary health care facility very attractive. That is why we're trying to raise their awareness. If governments can make the salary scale more attractive, give them incentive, they want to come to the primary health care facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miracle. I think serving people doesn't go with the salary. You first serve and the salary follows. That is how it is in Africa. Taratu, a question for you. What are the awareness programs going on in Yobe to address poor skilled birth tendency to reduce maternal mortality in that region?
Good afternoon.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me and you can see me.
Yes, we can.
This question, we do not have something like poor skilled birth attendants. It's either we have skilled birth attendants and the professionals. And the skilled birth attendants we have, They are either the traditional birth attendants and then the professionals. They are all skilled birth attendants. And these are people that are trained to be able to work in the labor ward. They are trained and certified. So in addressing maternal mortality, years back, I've been trying to start my video. In addressing maternal mortality years back, it was the involvement of everybody. The traditional birth attendants were trained in clean and safe delivery and how to take care of a woman in labor. And when the woman is deviating from the normal labor, going to complicated or abnormal labor, she should be able to accompany the client, the woman, back to the facility. And what we also did initially, we involved the traditional rulers, and then we did a sort of community mobilization, recognize where the problem is. So we have something like the ambulance services or transportation immediately to the hospital. And it was arranging the drivers within the community, taking it in turn. Anytime a woman is in labor, she is brought to the hospital, not even waiting for when it is an emergency. So they have a kind of bus that they contribute money for fuel. So those are the kind of, there are so many awareness for this. For women that will even come for the antenatal care, we make sure we take their numbers and we call them at home to find out what is happening. And if there is anything, they can equally call us too. So everybody that comes for antenatal care has its telephone number on its phone. So there is the ambulance service now. We've given them the numbers of the ambulance service in case of anything. So usually when you come for antenatal, you are given all these things. And apart from that, community mobilization, and we are now following the Save 1 Million Lives, and we make sure that there is much more training for midwives, community midwives. The school have increased that so that for every community, there is a midwife to be able to do something for that woman before she gets to the hospital. So far, so good. That is what we have done. We used to be the highest in the country with maternal mortality. But fortunately, because of all these things, the life-saving skills, the emergency obstetric care, the basic emergency obstetric care, BMOC, etc., we had put this into place and were able to reduce our maternal mortality rate. That's why we became the second, and I believe we'll be going down gradually. But still, it's just that we don't get to the actual problem because culture is equally taking part of it. And then how do we reduce maternal mortality? In reduction of maternal mortality, it is a whole collaboration with policymakers, all the sectors. That is, we need to work. We work with the educational sector. We work with the water people so that we have safe, clean and safe water in the hospital, and NGOs, and we have a lot of NGOs that come in order to help us. So in saving maternal mortality, in reducing maternal mortality is a collaboration of so many people. And we all know that it is in sustainability, in these development goals, it is the thought of which we are trying in Yobe State to do that. So we take care of the Safe Motherhood Initiative, that is Save 1 Million Life. We do the basic emergency obstetric care, the family planning. We go about reducing.
Let's agree. Let Roach, and you're doing it. I believe with time you'll be able to reduce maternal mortality. Let's get another question. Thank you very, very much, Taratu. So a question to Mary. It's often said that women tend to express emotions more intensively than men. How might this influence the political landscape, particularly regarding the election versus appointment of women in political roles? It is another one coming, which is very interesting. And how do we then ensure participation of women in elective positions rather than appointments? Mary, take on that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let me start with the second one. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, ma? Can you all hear me, ma? Okay, so the
We
second
can
one,
hear you.
how can we, okay, no problem. So how can we, let me start with the second question. How can we improve women's more in elective position? And I think based on what I explained, you know, they used to say like charity starts from home until we begin to include women from the political parties. Because when it comes to selection and appointment, it starts from them. They are the one that decides who should they come out to, who should to come out for election. And these things are actually based on some number of factors too. How popular is that woman? Because most political parties are not just after, okay, we just want to promote women. They're also after looking out for someone that can go out there and win the election from them, you understand? So apart from political parties doing some reforms, also from the side of the women too, women should be able to tell themselves outside in the way that have some past recordings of great things. It is when people begin to recognize you as a woman, it now makes it very easy for them to say, okay, we can reckon on her because we know that she's capable and we have seen her work in some other things. So while I was actually doing the research and I had to interview somebody there, he actually made mention of the fact that within the political parties, most women are not wanting to come out in the sense that they have to sometimes look for academicians, women that okay, they are doing maybe to serve as a deputy governor, to serve as a running mate from them for them. So it still develop on capacity building. Maybe there's a need to begin to mentor women in things becomes elective, or begin to mentor them on how to in leadership, how to take leadership in form of the political terrain. And it also falls down to the political parties also building the capacity of these women within their party. Then the first question, Mark, can you recap the first question now? So one side.
Thank you very much. Now a question to Rachel. I thought you were done. Were you done or you had something more to add?
I think we'll move on to the next person.
I'm not hearing her continue. I see her mouth twitching, so I think we'll continue. Let's go to Rachel. How long was your study? How did you assess the changes noted from your studies?
Yeah, good afternoon,
Rachel?
Good afternoon. Yes, my study took 3 months from October to December. And then I didn't quite get your question. You asked how long, then another one.
And how did you assess the changes?
Okay. The change, yes, ma. Like I said, the peer educators were trained, and they eventually trained the participants. And thereafter, we were given, I did FGD, though it was not in this report because the analysis wasn't ready then. But then they were given questionnaire, that's pre-intervention. Then the control group, their own, the intervention we did to them was given to them was just ordinary health education. Then the intervention group, we taught them the risk factors and everything about breast, and then eventually breast self-examination. So 2 weeks after, then we gave them some handout. Then 2 weeks after, we came with post-intervention questionnaire to know how far they have gone with what they were taught. And that was what brought out the results. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I think people liked Mary's presentation a lot. The issue of women in elective and selective positions is sometimes caused by societal belief that women can't get to the top or don't have anything to offer. How can we address that? Rachel, don't touch your mouth, just mute. Did you hear your question, ma'am? Mary?
Okay.
I think we'll pass that.
Yeah, the network was bad.
We wanted to understand from.
The network was bad now. I couldn't hear you.
Hello, Mary, please speak up. Speak up. We can't hear you. Speak up.
Network, I had network issues, so I couldn't hear the question.
Okay, the question is, and now I've also lost it. Yes, the issue of women in elective and selective positions is sometimes caused by societal belief that women can't get to the top or don't have anything to offer. How can we address this?
Okay. So thank you very much for that question. Like rightly what you said, that they don't have anything to offer. How can we address this? It's not like as if we don't have women that don't have anything to offer. At least there have been situations where women at the top institution, governmental institutions, they did well in that. But it really, really has to go into inculcating women into leadership, you understand? And that's, like I said, has a lot to do with mentoring, you understand? And because mentoring, because men, when it comes to politics, men have people they look up to. They have godfathers. They have people that, yes, they are following and they know how to do about this thing. So I think the issue is we need to begin to mentor women into leadership position. We need to begin to mentor women into leadership position in the sense that, okay, at little age as students union elections, because women contesting for those positions could begin to start mentoring them, so that when it gets to the point of all governance, it doesn't become difficult because they have understood the political terrain and they have understood what it takes to enter leadership. So it still falls back to, like I said, my recommendation still falls back to mentorship from the cradle down to the political parties taking up, ma. Did you get the answer? Thank you, ma.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm done.
I have the.
Hello?
You're still talking. Go ahead.
Okay. So as I
We are not hearing you at all unless I'm the only one not hearing you, Mama.
I'm done with that, ma'am. I'm done, ma'am.
You done? Thank you very much.
Yes, mentor. Yes, I'm done.
Yes, so traditional, you either talk or you say you're done. You can't say you're done and I see your mouth talking, but I don't hear the voice. Then I get confused.
I
So if you're done, do like this and
I'm actually done speaking, but I don't know if you're able to hear me. That's why I was just asking. So, I'm done.
hello, should we continue?
Yes, Madam Chair, please continue. She's done.
Okay, please. Now we are on policy on eradication of traditional birth attendance. I think someone was talking about them with compassion and passion, but the questions and high risk of maternal mortality before reaching hospitals. So do we need a policy to eradicate traditional birth attendance? If yes, how can this be put in place? I think the owner of that question is aware. Taratu.
Madam Chair, we have 3 more minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I said that is the last one. If she could talk in 1 minute, then I will wrap up.
Ma, I don't know what's wrong with my video. It's refusing to unmute. Well,
Please continue. Please continue.
Okay. Eradicating traditional birth attendance. It's difficult because the people believe in them. All we can do is that for them, we have told them whenever they have a client in labor in the community, please take the clients to the facility. We have sort of upgrade our facilities, and for every community there is a facility with somebody manning it within those communities. So we keep mobilizing the traditional birth attendant, and we even have the community-based volunteers that make sure that pregnant women, every pregnant woman within the community in each compound comes to the facility. They give them a card that, okay, have been seen by the community-based volunteer, move to the facility.
Thank you very much, Taratu. Thank you very much. The question was yes or no. So yours is no, we shouldn't eradicate them. So I think this is a discussion at government level to make sure that they either want them or they don't, and then they decide whether they need to work. Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. A very big thank you to the panelists, and a very thank you to all the organizers for this very insightful presentation and session. Me, I was greatly challenged about the issues in there, and I've learned a lot. Thank you very, very much again. We come to the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure we had a very exciting 55 minutes, which was well spent. Thank you, presenters. So again, we go on another 5 minutes break, and when we come back, we'll be having a very interesting conversation on digital presence as a researcher. I'm sure you won't want to miss it. It's going to be an interactive session. Thank you, and see you at the top of the hour.
Thank you.
Welcome back from the stretcher. The next session starts shortly.
Gordon, please, the speaker needs you to undo the slides. Thank you. Over.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever we are. It's a pleasure for me to be here. My name is Akoni Akinyemi. I'm a professor of demography at the Obafemi Law University, and currently I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation, and Development. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to see a lot of scholars. I mean, gathered like this for us. This is what makes us happy. So I'm happy to be here, and I've listened to the previous session, and I was happy also that I joined. So today I'll be talking, sharing some perspective and also discussing with us on what it means as a scholar, to make sure that we gain visibility. Not just visibility as a person, but also that we gain visibility for our work. Yeah. Please, the next slide. So I'll just be looking into just some of these outlines, and please, if you have questions, please, you can just put it in the question box, and I will take all of those after the presentation. So I will present a general introduction to the context, and also present some of my own reflections, and also discuss generally some tips that either I have used or I've seen people around within my network use that I've seen also that is beneficial to them, and also talks about the strength of networking and what type of networking we should be aiming at, then talking about the next steps. Next, please. So I will start from this context. I will give credence to Martin Luther King in 1947 when he was talking about the value of education and why, for him, somebody like him, we continue to push, for an educated society, educated people. So then, it put this in perspective to say that education itself is not just about what people earn in terms of the certificate, but because of, number one, the utilitarian value, and also what it does, to culture. And in certain days, he was talking about, so when we have education, what is the relevance of it? So when we take this also and we bring it into research, it's a perfect match, it's a perfect fit, right? So our research also, first question we ask ourselves is, so what's the utility? What's the utility? Is it just about us publishing because we want to earn promotion? Or we just want to publish so that we can be cited? So there must be use for it. It also to promote a certain culture, either you talk about it in national context. So when you see a nation that subscribe to research, you want to also see how that also improve in their culture, how that improve in many things that they do. I was listening to some of those presentation earlier talking about some of those reproductive health outcomes. So research therefore should help, a system to improve in a culture that some of those outcomes, should be better. What are the lessons of research? So therefore, research must enable us to become more efficient, also for us to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of life. So it's not just for us to do it. Research must therefore translate to that, either in our personal lives or within our own society or within the larger society. So the ultimate goal, therefore, is to build a thriving communities, also to contribute to a fair society and shape society towards the highest ideals. And that's why you see that for educated people, there's a way you build that people ask you, Is this guy really educated? So that also relates to research. It helps us, therefore, to build, this kind of communities. So a research-intense community, therefore, you also want to see, that the ideals also are very helpful. So that, therefore, takes us to setting the context on why, as researcher, we need to make sure that we are present. When you publish papers most of the time, please, the next slide, you are likely just to be cited by people within your field. I'm a demographer by training, and I work a lot in issues around public health and global health. So I'm likely to also be working among people that all they do is just to cite me. But the purpose of our research from the previous slide I show is far more than that. It should also provide some utilitarian value to the society. It should also help us, to build a better society, a better culture within the society. So that therefore talks about the essence of us having both what is called the vertical and the horizontal and networking. That our research also, we must be able to see what is the impact. How do we, push our research forward, to, the general use that people also can say, oh, I benefited, from the outcome of our research. So therefore, there's need for us to build, particularly with the growing digital platform that we have all around us. We need to build a very strong digital presence and networking as a researcher. In this current world, it's difficult for you to network if you are not if you are not present, within the digital network. It's a very difficult thing for you to connect. I can tell you that I have people around me that they've gotten a lot of opportunity, just based on their presence, either on one of the social media network or the other. The new reality of life also is to say that the digital world has become a new way for us to engage. It has been there before the COVID, but now even the COVID, post-COVID era now strengthening more, of those kind of digital engagement. I'm here now just in my room and I'm giving lecture and I don't know where you are. People are spread all over the world. So it has enabled that kind of opportunity for us to engage. It also, even for people who want to recruit either for consultancy or even for permanent jobs, for collaboration, whatever. So digital presence has provided that kind of opportunity, for exchange, for engagement. So when we think about the opportunities that we have, when we reach the wider audience, it's something that you cannot really, let me say, unlike other research metrics. If you have been cited in Google Scholar or you've been cited in ResearchGate, whatever, you can count the numbers, but the impact of your work, to the wider audience, at times it's so difficult for you to be able to measure it. And I'm going to give you a few examples. I've done a lot of, I've done some few research, and let me use a particular example of issues around diarrhea, the management of diarrhea among children. Yes, I've done some articles that I published on diarrhea management. But the issue, as I mentioned, is to say that people that are likely to read those journals also are likely to be people like me, whether wants to publish or wants to see, what new method do you use, or is there a new construct that you've introduced? But beyond those discipline focus, there are people, because I'm talking about diarrhea management. Diarrhea management is more useful to people who have a child, right? Because to guide them to do many of those things. And I can tell you that communicating just those findings in a layman's language to wider audience has fetched me more recognition than even what I get through citation of some of those documents. So we'll be looking into some of those issues also to see, so how best, can we also therefore use some of this digital platform to make sure that we communicate, to a wider audience, particularly the audience that we show the utilitarian of our research work, and also to make it a better society. Well, I know we are spread across the world, and we work in institutions. Our institutions vary in terms of their investment in digital platform, social media, and even in terms of research communication. There are institutions, particularly in Southern Africa, that I know that they are well structured to communicate, help researchers to communicate the research findings to a wider audience. But there are those also that institutionally may not have those well-structured platform. So I think this forum therefore is to equip us, allow us to start thinking on how we can help ourselves, not just yourself, also your colleagues, in terms of improving, their digital presence and networking using I mean the opportunity of this period, digital opportunity of this period. So what networking will therefore do for us is to help us to build authentic relationship and also to be able to support ourselves. I was reading one of my former students. She just put it on his LinkedIn, I think about 2 days ago. That was talking about what he's been able to achieve, within these last 4 years. I said he's been able to publish more than 70 good articles in an impact journal. So I was talking about how he came about that. And I learned also from some of those things he mentioned. To say that when he published the first one, he was able to discuss it openly and also look for people who want to collaborate to, again, further investigate what is done. And I saw people that show interest, and from there, he's able to build a very good scientific network. Now, I mean, it's counting 70-something articles within a space of 4 years. I can tell you that's a tall order, for scholars generally. Yeah. Next slide, please. So I would therefore want to just present us, with just some few tips. I know many of us are familiar with some of this, but some of us may also be present. But maybe our use of some of this platform may not, how do you put it now? Maybe we will not be using it judiciously. It is, but it's time, now for us to really sit down and be intentional about the use of some of those things, particularly because of the opportunities that it provides. Of course, I know we're familiar with some of those academic platforms. We have, for instance, the research gates. For any career scholar that is not on research gates, it's not a very good thing. Please, I want to advise that you please make sure you register on it. Google Scholar, and also the LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really particularly very good, because it enables a lot of professional networking. I've benefited a lot, from LinkedIn. I've benefited a lot. I've gotten opportunities through the LinkedIn. I've made professional contacts through LinkedIn. Somebody posted something about 3 months ago, and I saw it that we go from a university, and I commented, and from there we've established a very good relationship. The person will be coming to see me from Canada this coming June, but we just met on LinkedIn some few months ago. So it's good for us as researchers, therefore, some of those opportunities are there, and there are many other social platform people have argued that either people abuse it or whatever, but there are people also who are intentional about the use of some of those professional platform, because you can use them to really promote, your research focus. You can use them to promote your skills. You can use them also to discuss in a very simple layman's language what you have achieved, or the focus of your work, or what your findings, what it means, to an average person. So, like the Twitter or X, we also have the new one that is called the Blue Sky. I think Blue Sky now is where most professionals are migrating to. So we can register on some of those things. You have the Web of Science. So there are many, and I want to advise us today. By the time we are finishing today, please make sure that, at least for these critical ones, that you are able to register on them. Yes, please, next slide, please. So let me talk briefly about maybe just one of these, particularly the Conversation Africa. The Conversation Africa and some other platform, they look so similar. I know also about Kobo. I've published in Kobo. I've published in Conversation Africa. So, but let me talk briefly about it. Now, when I was talking, when I think 2-3 slides, the third or the fourth slide that I presented, I was talking about communicating to a wider audience, audience beyond your own discipline, audience outside your immediate scientific outreach. The Conversation Africa is one of those things that platform that I've seen that help scientists, to communicate their research findings in a way that a common person, an average person who is not within your field, will understand exactly what you're trying to say. I can give a few instances. I can talk about myself. I can also talk about people that I know that have used Conversation Africa. I have put some of my findings on Conversation Africa, and I can tell you a few of the benefit I've gotten from it. I did one article on the Conversation that the National Geographical publication also saw. And they wrote me from there to say, well, we're interested in this. Can they do it? They said, fine. At a point, they need to send somebody to me, from Germany, just to come and interview me on what that means. There was something that was to happen in my country sometimes ago that I wrote. I just wrote something about it in Conversation Africa. I've published it like almost 3-4 years before then. But I just wrote what that means in a very layman's language. So if you do this, I don't think it's the right thing. We're not postponing because we are not ready, etc. I was shocked. I got a call from one of the directors in the office to say, well, there is some more this article, what do I mean? And when I explained, I was shocked. A national event then that, they were thinking they want to do, but if they go ahead, I know it will be disaster. I was shocked when they said, oh, okay, so what do you advise? It should be postponed because we are not ready yet. I was shocked to see that. Whereas those same arguments, I've put them in articles like 3-4 years before then. But maybe just people like me that are chance to read those articles. So in places like Conversation Africa, there are a lot of people who just want to read. And you see that like almost every Monday, they push to you, through different platforms, some of those things that they want to do. So it's a scientific kind of platform that the media people will help you, to simplify whatever your research findings are and being able to broadcast it, to audience outside your own discipline. Same with Kobo. Kobo will ask you to say, so what is the main message that you want to push forward, in all that you have done? So then you'll be able to also say, oh, this is what I have done. For other platforms like the LinkedIn will allow you, for instance, you can put some aspect of your published article on the LinkedIn, and then you can put like 1 or 2 paragraphs, just to say, oh, this is what I've done, this is the implication of what I've done, and I think this will benefit, the public, if blah blah, if this is done. And you see a lot of top scientists, they use the LinkedIn also to, either to promote their research finding or to promote what they are thinking around some key issues. So it's a good opportunity for us to really see, some of those platforms to make sure that we intentionally, not just by design, you intentionally, register your presence, and intentionally you want to make the best use of it, not just for yourself, but also for your research output, so that your research output will have utility gains, and also we help also to improve, the culture, depending on where you are looking at it. Next slide, please. So, here are just a few tips. The first thing I tell people is to say that get a very good posture of yourself. I mean, it doesn't cost so much to just get maybe a professional person to take you a good photograph, because it is important, when You go to your profile and there are some people that your profile already suggests who you are, either you are a religious person, also. So we can really show our profile, get a good shot. That's a good headshot. I give an example. This is not me, I'm not, this is a very handsome person. But you can get a good picture. Don't just put any picture. You can go to the studio, make it nice, put a nice picture, on your site. Be focused on promoting your skill and experience. There are all kind of things you see on social media. In Nigeria, for instance, now, issue of election, it can be a very big thing. Particularly, you see young people that even don't understand what it means, the electionary issue, but you see, they are busy, shouting, or sports. It's about sports. People can get lost. Be careful. Be intentional as a researcher. If you want to catch form, maybe you go on Facebook, etc., and catch your form. But when you come to a professional platform like the LinkedIn, don't present yourself as a jester. Be careful. What you put there. Okay. It also provides you the opportunity to see the profile of other people. So when you see the profile of other people, for instance, you see people working in the same area you are working at, you can connect with them. For me, if somebody send me a connection request, I try to just quickly check who is this person. So if I see that, okay, it belongs to about 10 within my own network too, I'm likely to consider just to accept without thinking. But if I see there's only one or two of my contacts, I want to see, so who is that contact that we share as common friends? But if I'm not clear, then I want to go into your profile to see, okay, so who is this person? If I get to your profile, for instance, you're also a researcher, early career researcher, or a well-established researcher, that I'm convinced within what I saw, I'm likely to accept. Then we can have all kind of interaction. Be able to also share your publications or your conference presentations. Just be able to share it. Or maybe you have moved from one position to another. Just be able to share it. Because a lot of people will be checking, your profile without even informing you. Okay. Try to promote the impact of your work. Don't get carried away with irrelevancies. Let your profile show exactly your signature. Let it show exactly who you are. Don't get carried away with things that are so irrelevant. Be careful, particularly on those scientific platforms, what you comment on. There'll be all kind of issues around that are not necessary. You can look at it, but just ignore, and you just get your intention. Avoid any form of irrelevancies. Anything frivolous, just ignore. Get your focus, get your target, clear. Somebody was discussing sometimes ago and said, when I post things, nobody even appreciates that I posted things. So I asked that person also, how many people have ever posted things that you yourself also appreciate? Well, from the culture I grew up from, there's this popular saying to say that if you learn to appreciate people, people also will appreciate you. Okay. So when people also post something related to your work that you love and you read those things, show some sign. You can just love it. You can make a little comment, I love the methodology. This is profound. Just make that comment and go. You will think people don't read it. You will be shocked the quality of people that will go into the comment that you read. So also, they may also want to reciprocate that kind of thing. Follow you also and say, you are doing well. At some point, you may even need some recommendation from them. You can also read online recommendation. Okay. So you can make a whole lot of friends, professional friends on this social media if you're intentional about it and if you are focused about doing what is right. Yes, please, next slide. One of those things that I encourage not just early career, once in a while, even for established scholar to do, we should endeavor to make sure that we are active, particularly on scientific platforms. There are many things that, people just post it there. You see one body to say, we're having this discussion, we're having. if you are free, endeavor to join some of those things because you never can tell. There may be opportunities that will also be shared, at that forum. Okay. So please be intentional about this. Choose one or two. If it's possible, at least make sure that in a month, you look for at least 2 or 3 online forums. That will discuss an issue related to your work, whether in terms of methodology, in terms of publication, whatever, that you're also able to join. So join relevant online forums as well. There are all kind of discussion groups. There are also those that also have opportunities, either for skill cascading, or even they may even have other opportunities, to invite you to come. And when you join, try to contribute to the discussions. You can seek advice, professional advice, and share your expertise. I try to talk to some of my mentees to say that be careful, what you share with people, because it can have the kind of impression about who you are. It's not an opportunity for you to be writing, just met somebody online. The next thing to say, oh, please, I want to travel. I have a conference. I need money to buy the ticket. Can you help me? You already put that person off your radar. You understand? So be careful, Maybe people want to or may be able to help for those kind of things, but don't push those kind of things, Yeah. Also, there are opportunities on some platform, where people are able to blog. If you see such opportunity, please use it. We did a meeting sometimes ago, and we work with some young people as interns, and they just did some little work and they put on the website. I was shocked to see that thing was tweeted by a very big organization, even in the US, and that is very, very important. So when you see such opportunity, don't be afraid, Be able to do some blogging and just write. Things. If you don't know what to do, you can check what others have done and just also make sure that you try 1 or 2 things. So collaborate on open source projects. As I said, be intentional about looking for webinars, virtual conferences, etc. When people say that there are no opportunities, I don't believe it. Rather, we say that there are too many opportunities. This is one opportunity now that we're having for almost 3 days, almost free of charge. There are too many opportunities. If you just go online and you look for, I know today there'll be so many conferences, happening all over, that people can also partake and, and join virtual conferences. So engage media actively in the dissemination of your work. It is a very, very rewarding experience. For many of us who are researchers, those that are so, how can I put it now, those that can make good use of our research work. For instance, talk about those in the policy, or talks about those in big government agencies, or even the ministers. Many of them don't even have the time to read, okay? But they want to see something that is unique, that in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, they can read, okay? Or something that is catchy, something that looks so interesting. So I advise, early career people, learn a little bit about developing policy briefs. Okay. You can just develop it and put on your site to say, oh, I just did this study. I just work now on issues around, maybe you're talking about issues around, somebody was talking, I think I had a lot of issues around sexual and reproductive health today. So you can just put it there and say, well, these are policy direction that I think we can follow. Just do it, put some infographics, and you can post it there. So many of those will be shocked, about the quality of people that may read it and what that also can mean for us. Opinion piece in newspaper and magazines also is not very bad, particularly if they're online magazines. It's really very good because the audience also sometimes differ from the type of audience that read our regular journal. Community engagement and public talks. Yes, please, if you have the opportunity to give a public talk, don't shy away from it. There will always be the first day of starting. I tell people, if you don't learn how to start, and then it'll be difficult for you to grow in it, So if you have that opportunity, because it gives you the opportunity to even for able to hear your own voice and your own way of thinking, kind of. So I engage us that I want to encourage us that if we have such opportunities, it can even be that student, maybe it's your student body invited you to come and give a talk. Don't do it casually. Don't do it like the usual classroom work. Prepare for it. Use it as a very good opportunity because you never can tell what the audience will pick from you. It doesn't matter either your students or your colleagues or people that you're not familiar with. It can even be within your religious body. You never can tell, what the implication of what you're discussing with them, in even promoting your work and also promoting your person. So please, let's be intentional about some of those things and make sure that we prepare well here. Okay. Please, the next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Is the audio bad? I read a comment about the audio. Please, can you hear me, please?
The audio is fine. We can hear you, sir.
Oh, okay. So I saw a comment about the audio. Okay. So, as we continue to improve our research metrics through citation, networking provides other type of also other metrics. So, like the Conversation Africa I mentioned, for instance, it will also help you to see the number of people who have read your work. It will help you to see the number of people who tweeted what you posted or your work. Okay. It may amaze you that the number of people that will read your work in some of those larger audience-based systems may be far more than your own scientific outreach of people who will be citing your work. It also provides you that opportunity to cross-fertilize ideas and skills. I tell people that the best of scholars are those who respect other people's skills, respect other people's views. So when you network, it provides you that opportunity, to see things from other people's lens. It strengthens your work, it improves the quality of your work. And you get many of those issues even online, most of the times for free. It further extended partnership and network opportunities. Through it, you may gain opportunity to attend physical conference that may be fully sponsored and many other things, that can happen. So it helps you with your visibility and impact, impact of your work as I started with. And there are many direct benefits for your other networks and mentees and colleagues. So if you have a professor who has very limited network or who have no good scientific network, the mentees are not likely to benefit, from such. So if you as a person therefore improve your networks, there are other derived benefits for people even within your either your mentees or your colleagues, for instance, if you are well networked and you have friends all over Africa, you have friends in the US, you have colleagues that you are working together in other places. And let's say, for instance, you want to travel and you need a letter of reference, or your friends or your mentees need a letter of reference. It's easier for you to contact your friends to do that, than people that all their network is just within the department they live, and all they know is just within the city they live. So that's one of the derived benefits, when you, try to improve as a scholar, as a researcher, your networks, either vertically or horizontally. Yes, next slide, please. Okay. So for young people, please, conferences attendance is so important, both virtually and physically. When you go there, the first rule I tell my mentees is to say that make sure that at least you get contact of at least 10 people. 10 people. You can get 4 people who are within your own cadre, but look for people also who are established. If it's 3 or 4, make sure that you get their contacts, okay, and you follow with that. Get involved in outreach and activities. You can start from your local, and then you grow, gradually. Professional association is very, very important at national, regional, and global. For professional association, they usually ask for deal. And for many of us, maybe they ask for deal in dollars or pounds sterling, maybe 20 pounds or $30 or 30 pounds. Please pay. Because if you don't pay to be a bona fide member, then the bona fide benefit also may not also come to you. Please look for your professional association at national level, at regional level, at global level. Please pay and make sure that you are active, because that qualifies you to be able to apply for so many things. It's also a very good way also to network within your own field and association. Next, please. So, few tips of things to avoid. Please don't join the rat race. And I think that's the only lesson, one of the major focus of this conference, why this conference is holding, is that we try to get what is called quality research, so that there can be utilitarian value to it. And also, we can use that to improve our system, the culture for, but when we publish what are things in a predatory journal, or good quality thing in a predatory journal, it's not a very good way. That pathway is not good. Please avoid it, like a plague. Please avoid it. Oversharing low quality content also, please avoid it. As I said, just be careful, because social media also, as it has its benefit, it has also a lot of disadvantages. Be careful, be intentional about what you want to do. Just as it can help you to promote you, promote your good virtues, your good work, if you are not so careful, you can promote it otherwise. So the names you also use, be consistent with it. So if you be on LinkedIn with your name, make sure even if you're on Blue Sky, you are using your name. If you be on Twitter, use your name. Okay. On Conversation Africa, use your name. On Kobo, make sure that it is your name, because those consistency also, they are very, very important. Avoid neglecting institutional platforms. If you work in a particular organization and that organization has any platform, either it is functioning very well or not, make sure also that you register your presence, because it may come to the time that everyone wants to really validate exactly who you are. So if you go into your institutional platforms and you are not there, it may raise some doubts to say, wow, we can really trust this person. You said you work here, but we went to their platform. You are not there. So please don't ignore your institutional platform. As you look for your own other platforms, make sure that if you have institutional platform, make sure also that you are registered there. Yes, I think next, that should be the last one, I guess. Okay. So action point as we live in here, I've mentioned some of this platform. At least make sure that you go now back to ResearchGate if you are not there. If you are there, but you've been very casual before, please be intentional. Plan well now to see how best you can make the best use of it. LinkedIn, I've mentioned it. Go to Conversation Africa, register there. Which one or two things that you think you can do? Please go do a very good headshot. I just put it there. I can see Kudu Solajide Lawa. See the way he's smiling. You say, that's the way a person should look, Put some smile. Look nice. Put it there. You can write a very good biograph. Not too lengthy. 2 sentences, 3 sentences. I would say if you do that, you try to kill it. Kill it in the sense that at least you're able to let people know exactly who you are, without doubt. Oh, I'm a professor of this thing. I have a PhD in this thing. I have this skill, and I belong to 1, 2, 3 organization. That's fine. Be able to identify your skill and also check for others on the platform. But there are many skills also that you can learn, from other people. As we're ending today, please make sure you register, because it's so important that you have the ORCID, as a researcher. It's a unique identifier for every researcher. You cannot even publish in some of these BMC series. Some of these journals will not even allow you to finalize your submission, not your publication now, if you do not have it, because it's a good tracker, to really be able to track individual researchers. Again, please identify your professional association and networks. Please, at the national, regional, at the global level. Again, please ask for the fee and pay. I will advise that you start work on it immediately. And right now is a good time for you to connect. Thank you so much. I think that should be it. Okay, so as I said, It's a process. So you don't start and end it today. You continue to grow. Start small to stay today. You stay consistent. Be strategic, not noisy. Don't need to comment on everything. Comment on things that relate to what you want to do. Don't be noisy about it, you know. Just choose exactly what to celebrate. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm here to listen to comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. It has been an exciting, very exciting one for us. I mean, a lot of learning points therein. So right now we'll take questions from the chat box. I'll have a couple of them. So the first one I'm going to be taking is, there's a question on the conversation being limited to PhDs and above, not allowing people below that level.
Conversation Africa, right? Yes, you are right. You are right. In some cases, they insist on people having PhD. In some cases, if you have published like 3 or 4 articles, they may also allow you. But this is also what I share with people. If you have a good mentor, that is fine, because your mentor then can be either the first author, or even you, and then you can, how do you put it? You can be a co-writer or a co-researcher on that platform. I've done that with many of my students. I've done that with, even there was one of my students, even before he finished his master's, we've done something together. So it is possible you can, that's also the power of networking. So you can come together with somebody and do something there. Yeah. But if you also, I think if you have published in good outlet, like 3 or 4 articles, they may also allow you even to leave. But again, I mean, we can discuss that even with them and find a way. But it's a good platform to push. So that's lead author or a co-author, I think I will recommend it for everyone.
Thank you very much, Prof. There's another one I have here, asking how one can identify predatory journal.
Well, there are so many published metrics for identifying predatory journal. But for me, a simple test, is about the review process, because as either academics or researcher, the only thing we brag about, the only thing that makes us feel fulfilled is what is called the peer review feedback. You want to become a professor, you are going to be reviewed by your peer. You want to publish, you are going to be reviewed by your peer. So if the review mechanism is deficient, if the review mechanism is just to promote, bring it, let it come out quickly, it is predatory. There are many other metrics. But for me, a simple test of it is that the mechanism that reviewed that paper is not something that will make you proud. It's not something that you celebrate. So it's really not worth it, And when you look into the indexing of journals to talk about, Q1, Q2, it's also about the review processes. And so when you publish, you say, the people who review your work, they are top scientists. That's why they put it up that way. And you feel, you feel fulfilled to say, I appear in this. But if you appear in predatory, we know that the review process has been compromised even from the beginning. So it doesn't really hand you, that respect that is due for a scholar or a researcher. So there are many other metrics, but just in a very, how do you put it, in a very layman's language, is that many of these predatory journals, the review process did not respect, that kind of thing that promotes scholarship, that makes scholars to be happy.
Thank you very much, Prof. There's a question here asking about regarding consistency in names. Please, can you give a professional advice for some of us using 3 names?
So I also use 3 names. There are places that when I want to write, it only allows me to, like here now, my name it was just Akoni Akinyemi, but I have a middle name, Ibukun. So if I'm going to put the 3, then it's always Akoni Ibukun Akinyemi. There are times it's Akoni Akinyemi, right? So it depends. So when I'm publishing, the 3 will usually feature Akoni Ibukun Akinyemi. But on many other platforms, it's just Akoni Akinyemi. But I can always synchronize on some of those. So it's different from somebody that either the first name is completely different, you know. So you want to maintain at least your first name and your last name. It is very, very important. Otherwise, it may be very difficult, you know, for people to be able to link your, what do you put it now, your scattered work around just to you alone, which will affect, you know, you gaining the expected traction or benefit, you know, from your labor. You know. So at least your first name and your last name, make sure that, I mean, there's consistency in it.
Thank you, Prof. I have another question here asking how do one join the Conversation Africa and Kobo? Asking how to join those groups.
So it's not a group, as I mentioned. It's like, you know, when you want to publish, for instance, in our scientific journal, you will see the journal, there's a submission process, etc. So for Conversation Africa, it's also like a scientific media outlet. So if you want to publish with them, for instance, you can just go online and look for Conversation Africa, and you can just pitch. You know, you register first. They have a registration stuff. So you have the opportunity to do a pitching, or they can invite you, okay, to write for them. So either whether you do a pitching or they invite you, that's but you have to register first on their platform. Just Google Conversation Africa and look for the registration form. Kobo is just one of those several other outlets also. But I think Kobo may charge if you want to go a bit higher, but just for ordinary to put your research findings or the publication of your research findings, I think is free. And it's not just only Kobo, there are many other platforms like that, you know, where you can, you know, do a lot. Yeah. So for Kobo
Thank
also,
you,
I mean,
Prof.
you have to register. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. The accolades keep pouring in. Thank you. I'll pick the next question. Are there dangers to avoid by being on the social media or social network and sharing information about one's work? Would it not be considered self-promotion?
Well, I think there's a difference between self-promotion and promoting your work. And if you don't promote your work, who will help you promote it? Okay. So promoting your work means that, let me put it in two contexts. Promoting your work means that, for instance, I'm a demographer, as I mentioned. When I publish in scientific outlet related to my work, or either I'm doing something on population and health, I'm just doing something on demography. A layman may not understand exactly what I've done, and I get that published. Okay. So I may want to promote that work in a very simple language. Where this is what this means. Okay. And this is exactly what I'm trying to say. So that a layman can understand what I'm trying to do. That's not it's not, I mean,
Self-promotion. Yeah.
it's fine, you know, to do that, you know. Or you attend a conference. I mean, as a early career person, you attended one of these top conferences. And you either you make presentation and you have some photographs, and you put the photographs there and say, oh, I was talking about this, etc. at this conference. If you don't do it, who will do it for you? It's the right thing to do. It's not self-promotion. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Someone is asking how do one handle the fear of public speaking?
That will be for
another discussion. Yes,
another
absolutely.
discussion. But
So
as
let
I
me go to the
said,
next
you
one.
must start
Yeah.
somewhere. Start somewhere.
Yeah.
Start somewhere.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about being visible but not being noisy. When do we draw the line? Can you cite an example?
So visibility on this platform, as I said, first you want to reach your own scientific group. We say, oh, I publish this in my colleagues. If you read, you understand. We want to read a wider audience, right? To say, oh, let me put this in a layman's language. This is what I've, or you attended a conference, right? And you put it that way. That is what we are talking about, promoting your work. The other one is being noisy. Okay. There are all kinds of things that people do that if you ask yourself, it doesn't really add up, you know, to the image, you know, of you being a scholar or being a researcher. There are so many, you know. Please permit me to say this, that in my university, for instance, there are many ways of appointing people. Some goes through political processes that you have to campaign, do all of those. You know, if you turn that to be, for instance, your focus, on an academic platform. To say, okay, I'm campaigning to be dean, I'm campaigning to be, those kind of very cheap, low level, unacademic kind of venture, to an international audience. They're just making noise that, may not be important.
Thank you, Prof. The question keeps pouring in. I have 5 questions, I have 5 minutes. So I'll just take as many as I can take. So someone is asking the balance between having a personal social media where you share your random thoughts and keeping it professional. Does it not get to a point where the person's whole life revolves around his profession? I mean, how do you manage posting your personal thoughts?
Yeah. So again, the language for me is being intentional. There are many people on social media. There are researchers there. There are religious people there. There are all kind of people. There are people who want to promote their businesses, all kind of whatever. Okay. So if you have a research thought or you have just something to share, okay, that you think we add up to your profile, to who you want to be, to your signature, there's no crime in it. Every year when they celebrate the World Population Day, I sit down and it can just be one paragraph. Just my own view about how the world population is going. I always put it somewhere for people to read. Okay. It's just my own thoughts to say, well, the world population, oh, you say we are eating 8.2 billion. What does that translate to? What does that mean? To me. I will just put it there for people to read and people make all kind of comments. It can turn to, for me, that is that is what I'm trying to say. But when it's about things now that we not have to the kind of profile that I'm building, for instance, for me to then digress to issues around religion, to digress into issues around politics, and turn out to be a focus to say, oh no, this person is a thief, you don't vote, you won't, I can be with my friends and make comment on those kind of things. But on my professional profile, no, you will not see things like that.
Thank you, Prof. Someone is asking a very important question. To join many of these groups you ask us to join, you need academic institution to register. For someone who is not employed in an academic institution, what will you advise such a person to do?
Well, for those that require who have that prerequisite to say you belong, you must have this. But there are many that will not require you to. Some will just require you to say you have some level of education. I belong to many, for instance. Sorry, I have to be biased. So in my profession, we have what is called the Population Association of Nigeria. We have what is called the Union of African Population Studies. You have the global one that is called the International Union for Scientific Study of Population. And you have another one in America called the PAA. I belong to all. So what they require from you is just that you have a master's degree in a related field. So they don't ask you to say, oh, are you in a university or you are not in a, once you have a master's, you are qualified to be our student associate. And by the time you finish your PhD, you are qualified to be a full member. So if you are if you are linked to an organization, that is good for you. If you are not, you are still, a
Thank
bona
you,
fide
sir.
member.
Yeah. So I have 2 minutes more. I'll pick this. In order of name, which one is first name, which is last name? A lot of people have confusion how to arrange their names for publication and all of that. What's your
First
advice
name.
on arrangement of name?
My first name is Akoni. My last name is Akinyemi.
Yeah.
Akoni is the one they name me. Akinyemi is the one I invented. So and I always refer myself as Akoni Akinyemi. So first name is that my own name. Akinyemi is, the last name that I know. So for me, and I think again, it's about I don't know whether it's British or American. I mean, I'm just used to my first name being Akoni and my last name being Akinyemi. So anywhere I am, I will introduce myself as Akoni Akinyemi. I don't think I have how can I put it now? I don't think I have the empirical grant, to discuss which one, how to put it. But I think many places we just say my name and they start with their first name and with the last name. But again, maybe it's not a rule. Maybe others may have their last name first and also the first name. There are forms that will ask you for your first name, your last name, then your first name. There are other forms that will say your first name and your last name. So, but usually I'm used to ask my name, my first name first, then my last name. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, that's how I grew up to address myself.
Yeah. I think you put it in a simple way. First name is first name and last name is last name. And I
That
think
would
that will
happen.
be the last question I'll be taking for the day. I know there are a couple of questions. If Prof you can help us look through the question and answer box to address
Oh,
some
okay.
of them. Yeah, but I think
Oh,
you've answered almost all of them.
okay.
Thank you very much. I mean, it has been a very interesting day. We
Thank you
spent
so much.
3 hours well spent. And one evidence that the 3 hours well spent is the fact that we started with about 350 and we are ending with about 350. It means it's a very impactful program. A lot of messages, a lot of highlight from today's program. We started with Professor Agaku, who spoke excellently on gender sensitivity in research. It spoke about the prism with which you can look at it, whether as investigator or as participant. He highlighted that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not, as it relates to gender sensitivity. A lot of time when we look at gender sensitivity, we focus on probably writing and all of that, but it made us realize that gender sensitivity does not only, focus on writing alone. It extends from the planning stage, where most of the work that goes into designing a study is, to the design itself, the analysis and the writing. I gave a lot of example of how this relates to it. Please go through the chat box. The evaluation for today is on the chat. Please ensure you fill it. He gave a lot of examples of how gender sensitivity can affect research and how we can, mitigate those issues. He talked about providing infrastructure to support women, using technology as they are doing in Chi-Square. He gave a framework to follow to address these issues. And I'm sure participants in today's program have picked a lot of lessons as regards to that. Very quickly, we moved on to the abstract presentation session, in which you have 6 scholars presenting different work that relates to women and women health. We spoke about postnatal clinic attendance and how the attendance can be improved. The presenter went to talk about the issues around postnatal clinic attendance, how cultural perspective play a role in it. We also talk about the role of TB and effect of TB and how we can manage tuberculosis and improve the outcome. And a very interesting aspect is the issue of election and women participation in election and appointment. A striking point is that there was no woman elected. Only 2 out of 10 appointments in the states were women. We talk about rape and rape assessment, the important role of nurses in assessing rape participants, as oftentimes are the first contact with this patient, and how there is a need for training. So we went all through different perspectives in women health, which was very educative, and kudos to the presenter. We rounded it up with a very interesting, which I'm sure you agree with me, discussion on digital presence. 2/3 of the world is on social media, and there is no reason why you should not be there selling your products, selling what you do on social media. And I'm sure from today's conversation, we all go and do what Prof have told us. He talk about OKID number, ResearchGate, and a lot of resources that he has mentioned, which I'm sure all of us are going to key in and ensure that our presence will be felt. Like I mentioned earlier, the evaluation link is on the chat board. Please ensure you click on it, and it also be displayed after the meeting is ended. Tomorrow's session promises to be even more exciting. We're going to be talking about decolonizing research, talking about skill transfer, and a lot AI tools in research. These are areas I'm sure will interest participants. I will look forward to having you for another 3 hours tomorrow, and promises to be as exciting as today's, if not more. Thank you very much for spending your time with us, and do have a beautiful and great day. Thank you very much. I'm Kudus Lawa. Please remember that evaluation for
Thank
the
you,
3
kudos. You've done a very good, excellent job.
Thank you
Thanks so
very
much.
much, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your lecture was very exciting, sir. So please ensure that you fill the evaluation form. It's needed for you to get a certificate for this program, day 1, day 2, and day 3. For those who couldn't fill evaluation yesterday, it was reshared, but please note that for you to get a certificate, we are going to validate that you actually attended the session. Thank you very much, and do have a nice day. Secretary, over from my hand.